Ladies and gentlemen, RosterWatch Nation, welcome back to the epic RosterWatch podcast brought to you by RosterWatch.com. My name is Alex Dunlap, and this is the Week 3 DFS walkthrough and breakdown edition of the podcast. Of course, it is brought to you by mybookie.ag. Go to mybookie.ag today and use promo code ROSTER for a 100% deposit bonus up to $1,000. More on that a little bit later. But first, and before we get started, you guys, if you're watching this on YouTube, if you could please give it a like, if you could please subscribe, ring the bell, whatever the hell that means. I think it means that you click on notifications. You'll know when our content comes on. We would really appreciate it. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, we would greatly appreciate you reviewing, giving us a 5-star review. It's super easy. All you do is if you're on your phone and you appreciate this podcast, you find it valuable. If you find the Tradecast valuable, which I think is personally probably the most valuable podcast in all of season-long fantasy football that Byron does on Wednesdays to help you navigate trades and understand what the hell you should be doing with those things. The waiver wire pod, all that, man, we put a lot of work into it, and just the number of listeners to it has grown so much, but the number of ratings and reviews haven't. And I wonder if it's because people don't know how. It's like what you do is you just literally scroll up on your phone when you're on the Roster Watch podcast. Just scroll up, find the stars, and just hit the stars. It takes you 2 seconds. So we would really, really appreciate it. It'll go a long way with our management team helping us to keep all this stuff from outside the paywall. So anyway, we'll get started. Let's just start breaking down the slate. As always, where do you start? Let's just start with the Raiders at the Patriots. The Raiders have a 20.5 implied team total. The Patriots a 26.5 implied team total here in this one. If we look at the bets coming in on the DraftKings Sportsbook, we have the 26% of the bets are on the Raiders plus the 5.5 points, along with 17% of the money, 74% of the bets, along with 83% of the money. Or I think rightly on the Patriots. So we have the Patriots are a big public favorite here, but it seems like the money is behind them. And look, the Raiders are a paper tiger. Is that the right way to say it? A paper lion, paper tiger, whatever. They're frauds. They're a fraudulent 2-0 team. I really do think that Belichick will have something schemed up after that tough loss versus the Seahawks to just really, really neuter these guys. I think that probably what that starts with is identifying the best player that he wants to take away. I know we always say that that's kind of a cliche thing to say, but it is what Belichick wants to do. And I think clearly the best weapon that the Raiders have on the offensive side of the football is Darren Waller, and especially with Henry Ruggs being out. Henry Ruggs out for this game. I mean, Darren Waller has by far the highest target share of any tight end in fantasy right now. Certainly any tight end on this slate at 38.7%. Followed only by, believe it or not, by Logan Thomas, who is he's in the top. Logan Thomas. We'll talk about Logan Thomas later, but Logan Thomas, his target share is way down to 27%. So Darren Waller is just lapping the field as far as this is concerned. But it just feels like Belichick's going to find a way to take him away. And so whenever that happens, what do? I don't know. It isn't like I'm going to pivot to, Hunter Renfrow or Brian Edwards just hasn't been getting targeted one bit. I don't know I don't know what the Raiders are going to do in this spot, which makes me think that, Cam is certainly in play, but on DraftKings, the Patriots defense at home is only $3,200. So I think on DK, it makes a lot of sense to go there with the Patriots defense, just because I can't figure out a script in my head to where the Raiders are going to keep this close. It doesn't feel like a Josh Jacobs game. Josh Jacobs is too expensive. He's been questionable all week. I mean, Josh Jacobs is 7,300, and we're going to talk about it. But this slate, we can just mention it now. There are 4 running backs on this slate on DraftKings and on FanDuel that people are going to be instantly gravitating to. It's going to be Miles Sanders first off. It's going to be Jonathan Taylor second, and it's going to be Kenyon Drake third. And then there's also going to be some people that want to mix in Devin Singletary for 4,900 now that Zach Moss is out. For cash games, that's kind of how it's going to go. And Josh Jacobs is more expensive than even the most expensive of those guys that I just mentioned. 300 more, so nobody's going to be on him. Maybe if it's that kind of game, we could go with Josh Jacobs. But I just don't see where the plays are on the Raiders side here. I don't know, but they're going to have to get to the 20.5 point team total somehow. Maybe it's, maybe I'm sort of overlooking Jacobs. What is what is his injury? Let me just see here in the injury report for the Raiders. It has been, I just typed in Oakland, like that's going to get me to them. Okay, so we have questionable Josh Jacobs with a hip. Who else? Darren Waller's questionable. Out. We have Trent Brown still out. Kwiatkowski still out. Ruggs still out. The Patriots, well, we know that James White is still out. Prayers up for his family. Jesus. But, he is still out. So let's just move to that side of the football. With the running, the running game is Cam Newton. And I think Cam Newton's a great play here. I think that the Patriots are going to smash the Raiders, and Cam Newton might score 2 touchdowns on the ground. I don't think that I can trust Sony Michel, but way down at 4K is Rex Burkhead. He had 40% of the carries last week. It was only 6 carries, but I thought it was like 38, 40%. And he had the 6 targets. So he stepped right into the James White role. He's a good player. He's good at the game. It's not like the Raiders are, what is this matchup? Let me pull up the matchup tool. It isn't like the Raiders are any kind of tough matchup for opposing runners. We look at the matchup tool over at RosterWatch, the number 7 matchup for opposing quarterbacks, the number 3 matchup for opposing running backs, number 13 matchup for opposing wide receivers. So Julian Edelman in play, N'Keal Harry in play. Whenever you look at the Week 3 NFL DFS flex values based on Vegas player props, the Vegas tool over at rosterwatch.com. All these tools you can find with a pro membership at RosterWatch. It's only $5.99. I would really recommend going there, using the tools. You can start putting things together the same. I pull up the tools and I just fucking turn on the camera and just start talking. And you could do the same thing. N'Keal Harry, I did notice, though, at 4,200 on DraftKings, he has a 4.5 reception, 50.5 yard over-under coming off his biggest game as a pro last week versus Seattle. He's plus 160 to score. If you just take that versus the pricing, like I do, and I sort for you in the Vegas tool for DraftKings and for FanDuel, the prop, so what the Vegas implies versus what the pricing is, it would make N'Keal Harry the fifth best value on DraftKings on the whole entire slate. So just something to keep in mind there. N'Keal Harry, Julian Edelman, Rex Burkhead, Cam Newton, defense. No interest from me anywhere else. All right, let's move on to the next game here, and that is the Chicago Bears at the Atlanta Falcons. The Chicago Bears have a 21.75 implied team total. The Atlanta Falcons a 25.25 implied team total. It's a 3.5 point spread. We have 19% of the tickets on the Chicago Bears to cover that 3.5 point spread, and along with 15% of the money. So again, another big public favorite at home here that has the money following it. 81% of the tickets on the DK Sportsbook so far have been with the Falcons, along with 85% of the money. So the public is getting sharp support here for the Falcons. Let's look at the injuries. So we have Julio Jones, who, look, I don't even know if I'm going to play Julio Jones, who has a hamstring, as a wide receiver 1 in my season-long leagues. It's one of my high-stakes season-long leagues, just because Julio Jones, there's no better decoy in the National Football League than Alshon Jeffrey's a great decoy, but Julio Jones is a great decoy when he's kind of hurt. Mike Evans is too. These bigger outside alpha, somewhat lumbering wide receiver, although, Julio's not lumbering, but the way that he separates isn't always just with pure speed. He's a size speed specimen for sure, but he's a guy who can go up and body you. So he can be in these sorts of situations wherever the defense still has to handle him in the same sort of way for contested catch situations, et cetera. In the end, it makes these guys good decoys, right? And how many times have we seen Julio out? He's basically a decoy last week. So he's off the board for me. There are just too many other good plays. On the Bears side, we have Khalil Mack questionable. We have Mario Edwards still questionable with a glute. We know that they have had struggles since the very beginning of the season with different opt-outs and losing. I believe they lost their starting one technique to a COVID opt-out. So the Chicago Bears a little bit hurting there along the defensive front. I mean, just on the Atlanta side, of course, you could play Calvin Ridley. I just got done doing my show on Roto Grinders with my buddy Chief Justice and Derek Carty. And Chief Justice, his conviction play of the whole slate. If you remember last week when I told you this, it was Stephon Diggs, and I didn't play him, but shit, I should have. I hope some of you did. His conviction play is Russell Gage. He's 5,100 over on DraftKings this week. Calvin Ridley, you could continue to go with him. The reason I'm just a little bit squeamish about Calvin Ridley, and maybe it doesn't matter this week if Julio is banged up, but he's playing so far over his head as far as fantasy points over expectation. Let me just see if I can get my actual sheet here pulled up. So if we look at Calvin Ridley right now, so let's see, Calvin Ridley has an 85.1% snap share, a 25% target share. He's run 83 routes to Julio Jones's 78 routes, right? All that stuff looks awesome. He's scoring 31.9 fantasy points a game in PPR to Julio Jones's 14.55. He's getting 8 receptions a game to Julio Jones's 5.5 receptions a game. But Calvin Ridley has scored almost 22 points over his fantasy expectations so far this season. Whereas there are guys like, Julio Jones is only at 3.6 over his expectation. So Calvin Ridley's been coming through in the touchdown department, and that has really buoyed his scoring. As far as his weighted opportunity is just right there with a guy like Mike Williams. So just something to keep in mind there. It's not the best matchup for opposing wide receivers there. That's why I'm probably not going to be paying up for Calvin Ridley in this spot unless I'm deciding to stack this game. And if you were going to stack it, what it would likely be, maybe Matt Ryan and Ridley and Gage. And then on the other side, you could bring it back with Allen Robinson, who's a terrific play. We talk about one side of the spectrum, the guy who's the most fantasy points over expectations so far this season at the wide receiver position being Calvin Ridley. Well, on the other side of the equation, the guy that's most due, the guy who's most due is AJ Green. I don't know if that's going to happen this week with AJ Green. We'll talk about it. But the guy who's second most due on the whole slate, the whole main slate, is Allen Robinson, facing our number 4 matchup of the week. He's plus 125 to score this week. He's getting an 87.7% snap share. He's getting a 22.1%. He's getting a 28.1% target share. He's run 63 routes. His weighted opportunity is the 4th best on this whole entire slate of wide receivers. And the fantasy points under expectation for him is at almost 12 fantasy points under expectation, which, as I mentioned, the second most on the slate behind AJ Green. So we should be in for a bounce back for Allen Robinson. He's by far my favorite play on the Bears side. I think you could play Mitchell Trubisky because the Atlanta Falcons have been known to give up rushing to opposing quarterbacks. Shit. I mean, we saw it last week with Dak Prescott. This is a bad defense. So there are a bunch of ways you can stack this game. It's a relatively high total. I think that you could do worse than this one when we're going to see all the ownership is going to come from the two of the 3:05 p.m. or I guess what do you Eastern elites? What is it? The 4 o'clock games. We go by the Central Time Zone here at Roster Watch. The 3:05 p.m. and the 3:25 p.m. window. It's going to come from the Dallas-Seattle game. It's going to come from the Detroit-Arizona game. There could be lots of stacks in those 2 games. I don't think there are going to be too many of these early games that get stacked. And this is an interesting one. There's some good pieces that have good matchups here. So definitely wanted to keep that in mind. And something to keep in mind too, guys, before we move on to the next game, one of the smartest things you can do is download the Fantasy Life app. It's a free app. We use them for their news alerts in their community. The Fantasy Life app sends breaking news alerts faster than anybody else. That's 100% true. I have the app on my phone. It's very likely that during this podcast, I'll get an alert from the Fantasy Life app. I got it in week 1 about what was it? It was about Miles Sanders being out. You can get your alerts before everybody else, and you can get to your season-long leagues and make moves before anybody else. They monitor thousands of reporters, so you don't have to, and send important news as soon as it breaks. You never miss a relevant injury, trade, or other update. The Fantasy Life app also has in-depth reports and on-demand advice from a massive community. Download the Fantasy Life app for iOS or Android at fantasylifeapp.com and come in there and interact with us. Byron's always in there doing AMAs. I get in there. It's a fun deal. So that's the Fantasy Life app. All right. On to the next game here. Cincinnati at Philadelphia. We have a 21.5 implied team total for the Cincinnati Bengals, a 26-point implied team total for the Philadelphia Eagles. We have 54% of the bets here on Cincy plus 4.5 and 46% of the money. We have 46% of the money on the Philadelphia Eagles and 54% of the money. So I'm sorry, 46% of the bets, 54% of the money. So even flip-flop there at the DraftKings Sportsbook. This is probably the other game besides Atlanta, Chicago that I can see a million ways to stack this. My favorite play on the whole entire slate is Miles Sanders. He's in a terrific spot. He's facing our number 2 matchup of the week for opposing running backs. He's only 6,400. He's minus 165 to score. He has an 82.5 yard rush prop. He has a 3.5 reception over under with massive juice on the over. So we can apply him for 4 receptions here and 27.5 receiving yards. So basically Vegas implies he's going to go for about 110 rushing plus receiving. And with minus 165 with, 82.5, maybe prorate in a little bit of that DraftKings bonus. I mean, he's showing up on the Vegas tools is by far the best value on the whole entire slate, and he'll be the guy that I'm certainly locking in. But here's Jalen Reagor's out in this game. Who else? Let me pull up the injuries because there are a lot of players who are out, and I want to make sure I don't leave any of them. Jalen Reagor though is the most important for our purposes because I think that really opens up to Deshaun Jackson to some degree. Jesus, man, where's my injury report? I can't just keep on stammering around. Okay, so we have – all right, so Alshon Jeffrey's out. Jalen Reagor's out. Oh, and Fletcher Cox is questionable, which is big. That's big for Joe Burrow. That's big for Joe Mixon. I mentioned earlier that we talked about the Eagles side. Carson Wentz is fine. The 2 tight ends are fine. I don't know what to do about these 2 tight ends. They basically come to the same price. Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz over on DraftKings and on FanDuel. It feels like maybe Zach Ertz is probably the play on DraftKings, but Goddard's probably the play on FanDuel just because he's so much cheaper over there. If you listen to some of the people, I mean, if you listen to some of these Philadelphia podcasts, these Eagles podcasts, a lot of these people are acting kind of like I know it's just fan sentiment, but they're kind of acting like they're a little bit done with Zach Ertz. And, it's time to move on with Dallas Goedert here and see what we can get for Zach Ertz in a possible trade, et cetera. So not sure that's the feeling of the club. I know it doesn't mean shit what fans think, but I just have trouble deciding between those two, and there are some players a little bit farther down the salary range that I'm more interested in. So we will. I'll leave that to you guys if you want to play one of them. It's not a bad matchup for opposing tight ends. The opposing tight ends here in this spot. So Goddard, our number 14 matchup of the week is the Cincinnati Bengals for opposing tight ends. I think that if it was me, I'm interested in Miles Sanders. I could play Carson Wentz just because he seems too cheap on DraftKings. Maybe stack him with Miles Sanders and hope for a double dip on a nice long receiving touchdown for Miles Sanders. Maybe go with Deshaun Jackson. That's sort of how I see it. It's just going to be, besides the tight ends, all it's going to be besides Miles Sanders and Deshaun Jackson is J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and Greg Ward and stuff like that. So a pretty clear target tree. And then on the other side, my only deal with A.J. Green and the big bounce back this week is Darius Slay. I don't know if it's going to come this week. I don't think that AJ Green's washed, but I think let's wait till next week when he's facing a better matchup. I think the play this week is probably Tyler Boyd versus Phillies linebackers. That's just their linebackers and their safeties are just not very good, and it goes to show actually with our projection here for Drew Sample, who now sort of comes into play. If you remember last week after CJ Uzomah got hurt, Drew Sample came in and got massive volume. We see that if you combine the volume from those two, it's like one of the best opportunity shares in all of fantasy last week for the tight ends from Joe Burrow. Now, that did have to do with the matchup being Cleveland. That was a very good matchup, but the Phillies are our number 6 matchup of the week for opposing tight ends. And Drew Sample is a guy who we've seen him dating back to his time at the Senior Bowl, and we always liked him as a dude that was one of these true dual threat tight ends who can go out and catch and he can block. And I personally like those guys. I know some people say, well, I don't care if my tight end's on the field blocking. I just want him on the field for the 55% of snaps where he's running routes. And yeah, that's true. But you also kind of like a guy that can be in those heavy formations that down on the goal line, whenever they're looking like they're going to run it, and all the Joe Mixon owners are lining up and they're rubbing their hands like this for a touchdown, and Drew Sample slips out on a little, on a little curl, and he's wide open because everybody thinks it's a run. And so for that kind of, that small little bit of edge, just, having a guy that could be out on the field that often, it can be meaningful. So I like Sample. I like Tyler Boyd. I'm not sure how much I like Joe Mixon. I did see he came in with a decent enough prop, 65.5 rushing yards, 2.5 receptions at 17.5 through the air. He's plus 110 to score. But Philly, like we said, now this matchup of 22 overall, I'm not sure. I'd have to go in to see. I haven't gone in and looked at the guts of it this week to see what it's done with Fletcher Cox. But, go to RosterWatch. I'll after the show, I'll make a note to go look at that, and I will update it with Fletcher Cox. If it turns out that that his questionable status is not being taken into account. All right. On to the next one. San Francisco 49ers at the New York Giants. Just this crappy field, man, of the Giants. 49ers, 23-point implied team total. The Giants at 19.5 implied team total. 70% of the bets are on the 49ers here, minus 4, traveling for a noon game all the way across the country with one of the most banged up teams there is. Let me just look at the injury report here for the 49ers. Okay, so we have Jimmy Garoppolo who's out. We have George Kittle who's out. We have Raheem Mostert who's out. We have Tevin Coleman who's out. We have Dre Greenlaw who's out, the linebacker. We have Dee Ford who's out. We have Akello Witherspoon, who is questionable with a hammy. On top of the other losses that these guys have suffered, that is just ridiculous. So it's going to be Nick Mullen starting at quarterback. We've seen in the past that he'll dump it off to his running backs. I think it makes Jerick McKinnon a good play. The question you need to ask yourself is, all right, well, this team likes Jerick McKinnon. He hasn't really played any meaningful snaps since, 2017? Jesus, was it 2017? Because he was signed in 2018. When's the last time Jerick McKinnon even fucking played? It's like as usual, always very, very, very organized for this pod as I'm just kind of throwing my ideas against the wall. He hasn't played since I don't think he's played since 2017. He hasn't played since 2017. So it's like, what has he had so far? He's had nine touches in 2020. So are they going to go easy on him? We know that Jeff Wilson is. I've seen Jeff Wilson, the other guy that's going to be in there, score too many touchdowns for me to think that Jerick McKinnon is going to be used down at the goal line. The question though is, do we expect Jerick McKinnon to really pick up a lot in the receiving game to make up for whatever the pass catching backs and George Kittle weren't able to do? Interestingly enough, Jordan Reed has an excellent prop this week, 4.5 receptions, 52.5 yards. So they do think that the Vegas does think that Jordan Reed will pick up some of the slack. I don't know what to make of Jerick McKinnon. I'm not playing him just because they're right in that same range. I think that Devin Singletary, who we'll talk about a little bit later, is probably a little bit safer and who I would prefer in cash. But I think it's probably fine. I like Jordan Reed. I think I'm going to get him onto the cheat sheet after this prop because he was only missing it by one trend. And with the prop, I'm just going to add that as a trend, and that'll make him get on the cheat sheet for DraftKings at 4,000. I plan on playing him at teams that I don't use Drew Sample or Logan Thomas, or if I don't want to pay up slightly to get to one of the Eagles or get to Hunter Henry, who we'll talk about a little bit later. Is there anything on San Francisco? I mean, you can't play Brandon Ayuk. You can't. I think it's the running back. I mean, could you play Jeff Wilson? Ugh, I don't know. I don't know about that. Not on DraftKings. That's a guy who could legit get you, a 3-pointer. He's a guy who could legit get you like a 6.8 pointer by having like one rush, or 2 rushes for 6 yards and 1 touchdown. So tread carefully there. And on the Giants side, so we have. Let's see, Giants. Who do we want to play here? Do you want to play Dion Lewis? No. Do you want to play? I thought Sterling Shepard was out this week. Yeah, he's on IR. You want to play Golden Tate? I don't. Let me look at the matchup tool. Let me see if there's anything that pops here when I look at it for San Francisco, because clearly, we've had to manually sort of move down the matchup that they are for but it's still like some of these pieces that are hurt, like it's a bad matchup for opposing tight ends, and it's just a middling matchup across the board, even with all these guys hurt. So, not as tough a matchup for Daniel Jones as I thought it was. Look, I'm not playing any Giants. If the Giants go off against San Francisco when they're so banged up, I think it's fine. You know what maybe you could do is play the Giants defense. How much is the Giants defense? The Giants defense could be interesting. Let me just look and see here. So on DraftKings, Giants. Oh, no. Make this hard on me. Giants, 2,700. So they could be a good pivot off the Philadelphia Eagles, who I think a lot of people are going to be playing. I actually like I kind of like Giants D. I like that. So let's just say that if you're going to be playing it. Looks like we have some people in the chat. Oh, Ronald Martinez, what's up, man? B. Ollie, what's going on? Joe Saviano, how you guys doing? Minion Hunter, what's going on, brother? Do you want to play Mecole Hardman? Hey, Minion, we're not going to. I don't think so, but this is just the main slate breakdown. What an awesome game that's going to be for your Ravens, though, on Monday night. I've been waiting all offseason for that damn game. I can't, but we won't be breaking that one down here. Sorry, I don't get to look at the chat much because I have all these other tools pulled up. Okay, back to what the hell was I doing? I think we were moving on to the next game, right? We're on to the next game. Houston at Pittsburgh. Houston a 20.75 implied team total. Pittsburgh a 24.75 implied team total. We have 43% of the tickets and 43% of the money on the Texans. 57 and 57 for the Steelers. So people like the Steelers here, -4. I was talking to my friends, like I said, on my show, I do the Blitz with Cardi and with Chief that I just got off of on Roto Grinders. You can actually watch that for free this week on YouTube if you're interested. If you just want to hear another hour of me along with 2 other guys at least talking DFS. But I couldn't get those guys to be interested in James Conner after last week. And after Benny Snell fumbled last week and just thinking about how crappy the Houston defense is, I think that this is a game where the Houston offensive line is terrible. We were promised a better offensive line. We were promised Larry Tunsil developing. We were promised, Titus Howard developing. We were promised some of these guards beginning to come into their own. They are still bad. Deshaun Watson still takes too many sacks. the worst pressure rate from Football Outsiders. I was looking at it earlier. I believe it's the worst adjusted pressure rate allowed, whereas the Pittsburgh Steelers are getting the most pressure of any team. They're going to get some sacks. They could end up in good field position. They're probably too expensive to pay up for, I believe $4,100 or $4K on DraftKings. But it could make for some short fields for James Conner. And when James Conner came back, he played last week like he legitimately thought he was going to lose his job to Benny Snell. And Benny Snell comes in, he fumbles, and Mike Tomlin's just like, well, fuck this. We're going back to James Conner. And so with so many people flocking to Jonathan Taylor, so many people flocking to Kenyon Drake, so many people flocking to Miles Sanders, I just feel like guys like Derrick Henry and James Conner, who in other situations we would consider to be good plays, simply are going to be overlooked. And I'm playing James Conner in tournaments this week. There's this big question now swirling around about who's better now, Dionte Johnson or Juju Smith-Schuster. And I mean, by now it's kind of it's kind of fair to ask, as weird as that is. Let's just look at let's just look at them just in a vacuum. And let me go so I can just look at these two guys, these two jokers side by side. Okay, so Dionte Johnson has now gotten you less fantasy points per game than Juju Smith-Schuster. But Juju Smith-Schuster is also one of the guys who has the highest total of expected fantasy points or fantasy points over expectation on the whole entire season. Both of these guys are facing our number 10 matchup of the week. Dionte Johnson's getting 11.5 targets per game. Juju's getting 7. Deonte's getting 7 catches a game. Juju's getting 6.5. Dionte Johnson's getting 84.5% snap percentage. Juju's getting an 88.4% snap percentage. Here's the big difference is the target share, 31.9% to 19.4%. They're running the same amount of routes, 72 to 70 routes so far. The yards per route run is better for Dionte Johnson at 2.1 per versus 1.7. The weighted up, the two biggest things that I see here are the weighted opportunity, where Dionte Johnson on this whole entire slate, his weighted opportunity rating on the whole entire slate is number 6, behind only Adam Thielen, Julian Edelman, DJ Moore, Allen Robinson, and DeAndre Hopkins. And his fantasy points over expectation is just even. He's gotten exactly what's been expected. Whereas Juju has basically the third highest as far as points over expectation so far this season at nearly 16. So Big Ben said this week that he's working extra hard on making Dionte Johnson a featured part of the game plan, establishing more of a connection with him. It's not like he hasn't been connecting with him. Jesus, I mean, what did I say? 11 targets a game. One of the highest weighted opportunity ratings. So if he's going to him more, he's a good player. And the fact is, he's a good bit cheaper on DraftKings. Juju is 6,600. Deonte is 5,400. Where's the argument for Juju? I mean, I hate to say it. The one thing is Bradley Roby. I don't know. I said it last week. I don't know if I believe it after week 1 versus Tyreek Hill. I don't know if I believe it versus another fast guy like Marquise Brown. But it's kind of like Bradley Roby's been kind of good on these outside receivers, and Dionte Johnson's going to see him. So maybe that's the way you go, Juju, or you just pay up to be contrarian because Dionte Johnson surely is going to be a lot more popular. Overall, this is still our number. What is this on the matchup tool? Our number 10 matchup of the week for opposing wide receivers. Much better in the slot where Juju operates. So if you want to be contrarian, you can at least have the matchup to fall back on. Okay. On the other side, Houston, who the hell do you play for? I'm not playing Will Fuller, period. I'm not playing Will Fuller in season long. So if I'm not playing him in season long, I'm not like I said, man, I think that these guys are going to be in trouble. I think Deshaun Watson's going to get sacked a lot. And I'd like the Pittsburgh defense if I can pay up for him, but I think my main interest in this game is James Conner. Let's go to Tennessee at Minnesota. The Tennessee Titans, a 26.25 implied team total. And the Minnesota Vikings, a 23.25 implied team total. That, in my mind, adds up to a 49.5 over-under, which one of the highest over-unders on the slate. And this is a game that absolutely nobody's talking about. No, I mean nobody. I just want to click here and just see what the ownerships are going to be on some of these guys. Derrick Henry, 7.4% projected ownership. Dalvin Cook, 4.5% projected ownership. Adam Thielen, 12.1%. Ryan Tannehill, sub 2%. Kirk Cousins, sub 2%. Corey Davis, 2% versus the worst secondary in football. Jonnu Smith, 8%. In a 50-point team total. I mean, if you're playing in tournaments and you're mass multi-entering and you don't try and stack this game a little bit, I guess I'm not going to say you're doing it wrong, but it has kind of the makings that you want. It has one quarterback on one side that can hurt you with his rushing ability in Ryan Tannehill. You have a running back in Derrick Henry that everybody, their mom, their fucking sister, their dog, and their cat wanted to play last week versus Jacksonville before it flopped. Now no one's going to be on Derrick Henry. Sub 8% ownership. Derrick Henry could smash a slate. He could destroy a slate. This is a 26-point implied team total in this game, and there's no A.J. Brown for the Tennessee Titans. Where exactly are these 26.25 fantasy points coming from? Or not fantasy, at least 26.25 real life NFL points where the actual pigskin crosses over the painted line. Derrick Henry's an awesome play. Ryan Tannehill is kind of a good play. And as much as I hate to say it, man, Corey Davis, Adam Humphries, these guys probably good plays. That Minnesota defense is awful. That secondary is terrible. They're depending on Holton Hill from Texas. Speaking of Texas, looks like it's 0-0 right now with Texas Tech. I need to get back to this here in a second. Okay, so clearly great over there. And then, the good news is on the Minnesota side, if you want to stack it, you know just what to do. It's with Dalvin Cook and with Adam Thielen. All right. Washington at Cleveland. Cleveland, a 26.25 implied team total here. The football team with an 18.75 implied team total. Well, I mean, can you play Nick Chubb or Kareem Hunt? Whenever I look at this thing, I just say, well, Nick Chubb costs $6,900. That is $100 less than Jonathan Taylor playing against the Jets. And I just say, no, thank you. There's no way I can get to Nick Chubb whenever Kareem Hunt is still in the picture. Kareem Hunt on FanDuel makes some sense because I believe he takes up less than I'll tell you exactly what percentage of your salary it is, but he's a much better value over there on FanDuel, even though FanDuel doesn't take the receiving. And he's almost 3% of your salary less over on FanDuel. On FanDuel, which has a $60K salary cap, he's only $100 more than he is on DraftKings. So I'm playing one of those guys. I want to play Kareem Hunt, and I want to play him over on FanDuel. On the other side of this game, on the football team side, Terry McLaurin, I believe he's 5,900. I'm always gonna consider Terry McLaurin. He's seeing a 27% target share. He's out there for 94% of the snaps. The number of routes a little bit lower than you would like, but he's running about the same number of routes so far as that Tyler Lockett has run. So I think it's fine. He's run the same number of routes so far as like T.Y. Hilton, some of these other guys. He's run more routes than Tyreek Hill. So don't worry too much about that, because if you look at the yards per route run, he's at. So if you just take the total number of routes and you don't do it the way that I don't like to do it the way that I think Pro Football Focus has some proprietary way that they do yards per route run. If you just do it the simple old fashioned way and you just say, you take the number of routes and you divide it by the number of yards that this player has, or the number of yards this player has, and divide it by the number of routes. Terry McLaurin has the highest yards per route run on the whole entire slate outside of Chase Claypool. And Chase Claypool has only run 19 routes, so it's not really a suitable sample. So Terry McLaurin is super efficient. He gets it done, and he gets to face Cleveland, who I believe Denzel Ward is banged up. this week. Denzel Ward, of course, we know, a former teammate of Terry McLaurin's, two guys who from Ohio State, two guys who were former teammates and dudes who've obviously gotten in races before. That I would expect that to be a competitive dogfight of a wide receiver cornerback matchup there. But let me just pull up the injury report just to see if Denzel Ward, he's questionable. He's questionable with a groin. So keep that in mind. If we get word that there's no Denzel Ward, certainly would pick things up for Terry McLaurin, especially with Steven Sims now being questionable with a toe. And Antonio Gibson, man, any given week he could pop. So if you play tournaments, I would say just keep on rolling out Antonio Gibson and Logan Thomas. So that we need to mention Logan Thomas. He's cheap. We talked about weighted opportunity and target share at the wide receiver position. If you look at it at the tight end position, Logan Thomas is second in fantasy, second in football, second in the NFL, really, at the tight end position as far as his target share. He's a 27% target share. He's getting 8.5 targets a game. He's run 64 routes. Who's run more routes than Logan Thomas at the tight end position? Who's on this slate? Evan Ingram, Hayden Hurst, Dallas Goedert. Who has better weighted opportunity on this slate? Darren Waller and Travis Kelce. I mean, Logan Thomas is running hot like the sun right now. He gets Cleveland, which is our number one matchup for opposing tight ends. I don't think I need to really spell it out for you anymore. Logan Thomas is a good play this week, and I will be considering him as my cash game tight end. On to the next one. One more before we get to the afternoon games, and I can get to watching the Texas Longhorns, who are already up 7-0 here in this one, as DeMarvion Overshown. Oh, Jesus. DeMarvion Overshown, and then Chris Brown missing tackles in the open field. Los Angeles Rams at the Buffalo Bills. The LA Rams at 22.75 implied team total. The Buffalo Bills at 24.25 implied team total. The big news here, of course, big news, I guess, on both sides. But the big news for the Buffalo Bills is no Zach Moss this week, which brings Devin Singletary clearly into play as sort of a third running back option if you're looking to pay down and you don't want to pay up for Miles Sanders, JT, and or if you don't want to, like Zeke is going to be Zeke or Henry or one of the, if you want two of those big name dudes, Connor, it makes a lot of sense to get Singletary in at 4,900. He has one of the best props in the Vegas tool. The over-under for his receptions was 2.5 with a lot of juice there on the over. But the other thing is, 62.5 rushing yard over-under and 19.5 yard receiving over-under. He's also minus 115 to score this week, which would be absurd if Zach Moss were to be healthy, because you not only have Josh Allen to worry about down at the goal line, sniping away, quarterback sneaks and stuff like that, quarterback powers, QB dives, designed runs, but Zach Moss was kind of looking like he was going to take on that role. So, this is a week, man. Smoke if you got him with Devin Singletary. He's not priced for a Zach Moss injury. If he was priced for Zach Moss injury, he'd be something more like 5,800. So I think that he's fine. And I just think, guys like Stephon Diggs on FanDuel is so much cheaper than on DraftKings. I think he's playable over there. But look, this Rams defense is actually kind of been good. They have a new defensive coordinator. Let me look at what the matchup tool says. So the Rams, the number 25 matchup for opposing quarterbacks, number 31 matchup for opposing wide receivers, a middling to tough matchup for opposing running backs, but not as bad. It's more tough for wide receivers and for quarterbacks. That's what has me focused in on Devin Singletary. And on the Rams side, on the other side, I know people are talking about Robert Woods this week. Why are people so interested in Robert Woods when he's going to play against Tre'Davious White? I don't get it. I think this is more of a Cooper Kupp game. If I could only play one Rams receiver this week, it would be Cooper Kupp. And I also have to mention that Tyler Higbee on FanDuel is absurdly priced in comparison to where he is on DraftKings. he is actually only 200 more on DraftKings than he is on FanDuel. And I think he's a much better player over there. He's plus 260 to score this week. And the thing about Higbee is he's been on the field for 87.3% of snaps. I know the number of routes has been low, but the second best yards per route run on the whole entire this whole entire slate, besides Travis Kelce, 4.7 versus 4.3. Just for comparison, Darren Waller's like 2.8. So Tyler Higbee has been super efficient, not only with, clearly got in the box 3 times last week. He is operating at like, almost 20 points over fantasy expectations so far early in the season. He's going to regress, but the point is that's because of the touchdowns. As far as when he actually runs routes, he's more efficient in the yardage category than any tight end on this slate, not named Travis Kelce, or at least he has been so far this season. No interest in Malcolm Brown or Darrell Henderson for me. That game of whack-a-mole is something that I'm not going to partake in. I know Henderson looked good last week, but I'll be damned if I'm going to trust that guy any farther than I can throw him. No, I think that does it. Let's move on to the 3 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central games. First, I need to tell you that we're rolling into fall, and at my bookie, that can only mean one thing. It is winning season. Winning season means doubling your first deposit. Winning season means free bets, super contests, Survivor, and more. At my bookie, winning season is all about your chance to win big. Bet the NBA playoffs. You can bet Major League Baseball, UFC, and then some. The craziest sports summer has turned into fall, and it's the craziest of your lifetime. It's finally here. It's simple. Make your picks, win big, collect your cash, invest in your intuition. Select from hundreds of futures bets, or you can bet the games in real time with MyBookie's live betting. Put that big brain of yours to good use. Use promo code ROSTER, ROSTER, all caps, and double your first deposit. New players get up to $1,000 in free play designed to add more excitement to the sports you love and the games you bet. Thousands of cross-sport wagers, props, and parlays await. Sign up now to bet with the best and celebrate your victory. Your winning season begins today only at MyBookie. And remember, use promo code ROSTER to get a 100% deposit bonus up to $1,000. So if you put in $100, you get an extra $100 to play with. If you put in $1,000, you get an extra $1,000 to play with. MyBookie.ag, promo code ROSTER. The NFL has been good to us. They've heard my bitching, dear listeners and viewers, about only 3 games in the afternoon. What the hell, man? What the hell's wrong with you? So we get 5 afternoon games this week, 2 of them at 3:05, and then 3 more coming up at 3:25. If you're winning to start the day, I wouldn't tweet out any screenshots of your big tournament wins until we get through these afternoon games, because I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of fantasy action heavily concentrated in these. And it starts out with the Carolina Panthers at the Los Angeles Chargers. Carolina an 18.5 implied team total. The Chargers a 25-point implied team total. We have 25% of the tickets on the Panthers to cover that 6.5 points, along with 21% of the money. Three quarters of the public on the DK Sportsbook is on the Chargers here, along with 75% of the handle that they've taken in over 79% of the handle that they've taken in over there. So everybody's on the Chargers here, minus 6.5. Everybody loves Justin Herbert. They love what he's done with Austin Eckler. It looks like Josh Kelly might be in a little bit of a squeeze somewhat here in the number 1 matchup of the week for opposing running backs. But thankfully, Justin Jackson has been downgraded to doubtful. He'll be back eventually, but now Joshua Kelly, all this means is he gets another week to get a stranglehold on this sort of 1B job to Austin Eckler's 1A. I really like Kelly this week. I think Eckler is a good play this week as well. It's just Eckler is in a price range so much higher. You can pay down to $5K to get Joshua Kelly, and you can get on him as opposed to Devin Singletary. Those are 2 good plays right there if you're looking to pay down for your third running back option, which makes a lot of sense with a lot of these builds. If you want to play Kyler Murray at your quarterback and you want to play DeAndre Hopkins as a wide receiver, along with 2 stud running backs, 1 pay down option at tight end like Drew Sample and Logan Thomas, you can figure out about how those builds work. But again, and you guys know that my mind works for cash games. So I wouldn't necessarily say that, if you're playing tournaments, all bets are off. I just feel like that. So I wouldn't go put $1 million bills like that into the Millionaire Maker. But if you're playing cash, I think you're going to run into a lot of bills that are kind of like that. I don't know about Keenan Allen or Mike Williams or any of these guys. I do think Hunter Henry. I'll just say this: Hunter Henry is popping in our model for the DFS cheat sheet. He's on the DFS cheat sheets that you can find at RosterWatch.com. I don't always know exactly what. I mean, we built the models, but I don't always know exactly why. I don't always go and investigate. With Hunter Henry, I think it just has to do with the target uptake. Man, it just seems like Justin Herbert really likes that guy. But Herbert kind of was good for everybody except for Mike Williams. He's like kryptonite for that guy, good for everybody else, which is fine with me because I don't like to play Mike Williams anyway. The Carolina side, no Christian McCaffrey. Mike Davis, he's another guy right there in that same price range with Joshua Kelly, with Devin Singletary. And if you look on the Vegas tool, it actually thinks Mike Davis is a better value because Mike Davis has a 4.5 reception over-under on the DraftKings Sportsbook. Now, there is heavy juice on the under. So let's just say that we're being implied that he gets 4 receptions, 42.5 rushing yard, 4 reception, 30.5 receiving yard. That's 73 total yards. If he's plus 115 to score, that is an implied projected scoring on DraftKings of 14.09 points. That's 2.76x value on the $5,100 salary. That's the 6th best value on the slate. So I don't know if I have a blind spot to Mike Davis. I don't know if it's because I think that the Chargers defense is so damn good. I don't really want to play anybody against them because I think the Panthers are so bad. But we did see last week, man, but McCaffrey goes out and Mike Davis gets peppered with what he get 8 targets. It was more targets than McCaffrey's seen. You got to think DJ Moore is going to pick up some of the slack for Christian McCaffrey, maybe especially in the receiving game. They're kind of similar guys in what they can do after catch. In the short and intermediate passing game. You got to figure that Curtis Samuel, who took 4 snaps last week at running back, Joe Brady has said, Matt, was it Brady or Matt? I think it was Joe Brady has said this week that Curtis Samuel could play running back. I don't think he's going to do that much, but I do think that it adds a little bit of juice to the squeeze there that he could get some carries out of the backfield and maybe get a little bit more involved. They're going to have to scheme some things up to make up for McCaffrey being out for the next 4 to, who knows? He says he wants to get back sooner than that. But Mike Davis, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson. Boy, you talk about one of these guys as fantasy points over expectation. What is it for Robbie here? Let me look at all these guys and just sort of see, because let's compare the group. So Robbie Anderson, yeah, Jesus. So he scored 21.65 fantasy points per game so far. So whenever we consider he's run 77 routes, DJ Moore's run 79 routes, Curtis Samuel's run 58 routes. Curtis Samuel is just horrible in his yards per route run. Robbie Anderson's been better than DJ Moore in his yards per route run. The weighted opportunity has been much better for DJ Moore, who's actually due some positive regression as far as his fantasy scoring. He's about 8 points under expectation right now, whereas Robbie Anderson's almost 18 points over expectation for what he's been doing. So the fact that, I don't know, I mean, 77% of snaps versus 88% of snaps for DJ Moore. I think I'd be more interested in DJ Moore here, but he's 900 more than Robbie Anderson. It's like, I don't know where on this Carolina Panthers I'm going to go. I want some Josh Kelly. I want some Hunter Henry in this game. Probably sprinkle in some Mike Davis. DJ Moore is just so much of a better player than Robbie. I don't know how long Robbie Anderson can keep this up. All right, we move on through the 305 games, and the next one we get to is the New York Giants and the Indianapolis Colts, the crappy Giants who are just coached by a fucking moron, Adam Gase, who inexplicably does. I'm not even getting started on Chris Herndon from last week. 16.25 implied team total. Indianapolis at 27.75 implied team total. Is anybody betting on the Jets? 42% of the bets are on the Jets by idiots, because only 6% of the money's on the Jets. So it's a bunch of poor people betting on the Jets, which makes sense because these people obviously have gone to the poorhouse by doing idiotic things like betting on the Jets. 42% of the public, only 6% of the money. That's how you go broke. I mean, that's like, that tells you the story there. 58% of the tickets are on the Colts, along with 94% of the money. Jonathan Taylor, anybody? The best offensive line versus the worst defensive line? Any interest? I'd like to play the Colts defense and Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor's $7K. People are saying he's getting too expensive. It's like, too expensive for what? He's more expensive than last week. But yeah. But I mean, what more do you want? I'd be paying $8,000 for him. I'd be paying $8,300 for him. That's what he's going to be that soon, and we're going to have these kinds of conversations when it's this kind of matchup. Jonathan Taylor is facing our number 12 matchup of the week for opposing running backs, and it's even better than that when you take into account the offensive line versus the defensive line matchup. And he's only $7K. He has an almost 80-yard rushing prop. He has over a 20-yard receiving prop. Vegas has him slated to catch 3 balls. He's minus 145 to score. He's the best running back prospect we've seen since Todd Gurley or Ezekiel Elliott. Get him in. Jack Doyle's back, so that takes the shine off of any Mo Alley Cox sort of stuff. T.Y. Hilton this week said his grandma called him up and asked him what the hell was wrong with him. She couldn't recognize his play. So that was nice to hear. Could mean a big game for T.Y. Hilton. We know that he likes to go bigger at home or in Houston, where he's basically made that his second home. But on the Jets side, I just don't know. I'm not playing Herndon. I don't give a shit what Cardi says about Chris Hogan. I'm not playing him. Josh Malone. Chris Hogan's been hurt all week. He's going to get hurt early in this game. It's going to swindle people. Braxton Berrios, no, I don't want to play any of them. I'm not playing Herndon. I know it's probably, the same reasoning for playing Herndon. You could play him this week. The matchup isn't the best for Indy, but I know that our matchup tool has taken into account that Malik Hooker is now out for the Colts. It still doesn't show up as a terrific matchup. Where does it show up? Herndon. Where does it show up here? I probably have Herndon so far down these rankings. Did I not even? Well, that's a mistake. I need to have Herndon in the rankings. I was so tilted I just took him out of the rankings earlier. Okay, the matchup tool. It's a bottom third matchup, even without Malik Hooker. So no Jets. Just don't do it, man. Friends don't let friends play these Jets. I'm not going to do it. I don't care how good it makes the rest of your lineup look when you want to play Chris Hogan as your wide receiver 3 and just hope for 12 points out of. Look, if you could guarantee me 12 points out of Hogan, I'd probably do it in cash. But I don't trust those Jets. I think they're terrible. I think Gase is awful. I think he should be fired on the tarmac after this game, win, lose, or draw. He shouldn't feel like. How does that guy still have how does he keep getting jobs? We're going to need Chris Herndon to go to another NFL franchise so he can get freed the same way that Kenyon Drake was freed, in the same way that Devontae Parker was freed, in the same way that Ryan Tannehill has been freed. And it's like, and the list really, really does go on and on and on. Herndon will just be the next. So tilting. Detroit at Arizona. The Lions have a 25-point implied team total. The Arizona Cardinals are 30.5 implied team total. I wonder how's the public betting this one? Whoa. Whew. Okay, so only 10% of the tickets are on the Lions, along with 9% of the money. plus that 5.5 points. The Arizona Cardinals have 90% of the tickets and 91% of the money on DK. So everybody's on the Cardinals here. It's because Kyler Murray is going to be the top quarterback play on the slate. And he's an awesome one, man. People say, they say he's not going to run like he did before, like he did versus Washington, because Detroit can't get pressure like Washington. And that's true. But so, like, do people watch these games? A lot of this stuff is just Kyler sort of rolling out and it being designed as a read for him to just kind of take it in and run to the open space. He's so fast. I still remember in the training camp when he first came in last year, and Kyler Murray was running. Remember we don't have a 40 time on Kyler, but he was running sprints after practice with the team, and he was faster than Andy Isabella. So it's like that's an Ohio State track champion. So God, Kyler's fast, and Matt Patricia plays this dumbass. He plays man more than anybody else. And you play man, what happens? Your back's to the quarterback. The quarterback shimmies off and creates space. Kyler's just a great play this week. DeAndre Hopkins has a wonderful matchup this week. It's really an easy thing that makes you feel very comfortable to put in Kyler Murray, put in DeAndre Hopkins. They're home. They're in a dome. Bad defense. It should be high scoring. It should be fast paced. It's just good all around. And for the same reason, you want to play Kenyon Drake. This Lions defense is just bad. The matchup for Drake is great. If I look at the Vegas tool, Kenyon Drake shows up very well on this thing. He looks like the 7th best value on the slate versus our number 5 matchup of the week. He's minus 185 to score. We saw less Chase Edmonds in week 2 than we saw in week 1, which is always comforting to know that we're not going to get swindled with a guy but Kenyon Drake's only 6K here. And just when you look at it, he has been playing 68% of snaps. It's the target share that worries you a small bit, only a 5.7% target share here. But as far as he's at least he's out there running routes, right? He's out there running routes. He's being used in the passing game. He's tied right now for the 5th most routes run by a running back on this whole entire slate. He's out there running routes. It's just a matter of Kyler finding him or a matter of these routes working. But he's a piece that's been written into the passing game. So the other thing about Drake too is like he's not one of these guys that's overperformed in such a major way. He's not like a Chris Carson or an Aaron Jones or an Alvin Kamara or one of these guys that's just had a ton of big time touchdown luck or a ton of dependency for those kinds of plays or that kind of efficiency. It's like we're still kind of waiting for it for him. And this is a scoring environment and a matchup that looks really good for Kenyon Drake. So it's why I said he's one of my top 3 favorite running backs on this slate. At this point, we've talked about all 3: Miles Sanders, Kenyon Drake, and Jonathan Taylor. Is it hard to get all 3 in and still get in DeAndre Hopkins and Kyler? Yeah, it's hard. So you got to make some choices. And maybe for me in cash, the choice might be to get off Drake if I'm looking to play Kyler and DeAndre Hopkins and pay down there to Joshua Kelly or to Devin Singletary, just because my hope would then be that this game turns into a DeAndre Hopkins, Kyler Murray game, and Kyler Murray rushes in for 1 and hits D-Hop for 2 others, and Drake just gets his, 4 receptions for, 32 yards and 62 on the ground, which would be fine, but not a monster that's gonna come back to kill me. Still love Drake though. The models love him. It's like I'm just talking from a cash construction standpoint. You always got to remember that my mind works for I want the good plays. These guys that are the tournament players. I'm trying to learn and trying to get better at them, but it's just so hard for me to just want to play the play that's not the best. It's just. As well. I do think this week, though, there are plays like that. Like I mentioned, James Conner, no one's going to play him. Derrick Henry, no one's going to play him. I have a sneaky feeling that it feels gross to play Tennessee, Minnesota But I'm going to stack that game in a couple of tournaments. And who knows? It could hit, it might not hit. But I kind of feel like you got to go into these tournaments with the expectation that it's just who knows, right? In cash, you go in with the expectation, you want to double your money. Okay. Oh, and the Lions, no running backs, no Kenny Golladay. He even said he's not 100%. If he's not 100%, even though Patrick Peters is not as good as he used to be, he should be able to handle a Kenny Golladay that's not 100%. And maybe Marvin Jones. He's going to be less than 6% owned, is what we were discussing earlier on the Roto Grinders show. So Marvin Jones could be a good bring back option there. Oh, and TJ Hawkinson. We talked about efficiency on the yards per route run. The guy checking in right behind Tyler Higbee is TJ Hawk, and we can all close our eyes and just dream about that week 1 last year versus the Arizona Cardinals when he just ran wild and didn't really do it again for the whole rest of the year. But he did show us that this was going to be a boon to start tight ends versus Arizona for the rest of that year. They've been a little bit better so far this season. It doesn't have much to do with their rookie first-round pick, Isaiah Simmons, surprisingly. All right. Let's go to Dallas at Seattle, the big boy. This is it, guys. This is Jesus, is this right? Is this a 57-point over-under? Dallas has a 26-point implied team total. Seattle has a 31-point implied team total. Here's my hot tip here. Play everybody. Yep. All right, let's move on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Denver Broncos. Tampa Bay, a 24-point implied team total. The Denver Broncos, an 18.5-point implied team total. The Denver Broncos breaking in a new quarterback here in Jeff Driscoll, going up against a very stout Tampa Bay defense. I like the Tampa Bay defense this week. Chris Godwin back this week. No one's going to play him. I don't think the Denver defense is as good as anybody has made them out to be, and Godwin is going to be out of sight, out of mind. Nobody is going to play Chris Godwin this week, and I can just see 3% owned. I can see him getting open on a lot of the same routes that we saw Corey Davis getting open in the week 2 matchup? Was that week 2 or week 1? Things start to blend together, but I remember some of those crossing routes, some of those deeper some of those dagger routes. Those are routes where Godwin can win, and those are routes that Tom Brady is extremely comfortable with. So like Godwin here in this spot, I think Leonard Fournette's probably fine. I think he showed up in one. Yeah, he did. Whether I'm not sure if it was on DraftKings or if it was on FanDuel, but he did show up on one of the cheat sheets. Melvin Gordon, he had a bad matchup last week versus Pittsburgh, and actually came out okay. Without Phillip Lindsay in, you could probably pivot over to him. I'm not going to do it. I think the Tampa Bay is maybe even, although Pittsburgh is a tougher matchup just across the board as a defense, I think Tampa Bay is probably they're a run defense that I just don't want to mess with. They run stunt more than anybody else in the league. It's what Todd Bowles does, and it's what they do. With that being said, Melvin Gordon's 5,800. He's going to be probably 2% owned. So again, it's another bad play that makes you feel gross, but it could end up being helpful for you. And look, if I'm going to be paying all the way down at one of these positions for some idiot like Josh Malone that just got signed to the New York Jets on Tuesday, or Braxton Berrios, who's basically a poor man's Trent Taylor or Trey Quinn, or Chris Hogan, who is an old injury waiting to happen and just a constant practice squad and preseason journeyman for the Jets of all people. Why not just pay all the way down to the very minimum and get an absolute bottle rocket who'll be getting his first action for the Denver Broncos in one Mr. K.J. Hamler.